Now we're live. I'll I'll do the and actually, you know what? That's fine. Metamorphic Customs, looking forward. Hello, everybody joining in. Denobi 2 here. On tonight's live stream, I got Aries from a 6-scale Cantina. Say hello, Aries.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me on. Denobi, how are you?
Good, good. This is something that I had reached out to you a week or two or so ago, and it was not so much. We'll probably end up talking about hot toys, but it was more of the video that you posted on the transition from Star Wars Black Series figures into hot toys. And before you posted your video, I'm only on Instagram, and I tend to flow on Reddit. And I'm actually quite aware that several people in the last year have made the transition from Star Wars Black Series, or mainly action figures, into hot toys. And I just found your story really fascinating, because what you describe, I call the purge, where I was just like you. I went super heavy into collecting Star Wars Black Series and so forth.
Right.
And then one day I woke up, I'm like, this isn't working, So just to kind of bring a recap for folks that are just joining in right now, if you can kind of give more of a condensed, quick version of your story, Aries, and then we'll segue from there on your transition.
Sure. No, and it was kind of interesting too. When I tell people that story, and people have also reached out to me, it's kind of amazing to me just how many collectors were selling off their Black Series figures to get into hot toys. And even some of the other channel creators that I talked to, and even some store owners are telling me, they're selling some hot toys figures within the secondary market, and they're some of their customers like, I'm selling off my Black Series collection. So it was very, very interesting to me. I thought maybe I was the only one.
No,
but apparently, that I heard from you, and it seems to be like a recurring theme of some sorts. But no, to make a long story short, in the video you were mentioning, I was bringing it up as a point, in having some joy in collecting, I believe, and also just having a collecting focus that price matters. And with the Black Series, I just kept getting sucked in and sucked in and sucked in really just hoarding these all like a dragon is hoarding treasure. Yeah. And really just kind of hovering and laying on top of it, but not in the same way as when I really enjoy collecting something or an action figure, which you and I talked about too, over the phone, such as when I was younger. I would, just couldn't wait to feel the joy of that action figure, but I wasn't feeling it with what I was doing with Black Series, for instance. Yeah.
Well, you started really collecting from the 80s. You started collecting Return of the Jedi, that vintage line. Did you start in the 90s? Because I'm more of a child of the 90s with the power of the Force. That's what sucked me in.
More, believe it or not, and give away my age a little bit here, but in the late 70s and in the early 80s for sure. But back then, when I was a youngster, it would be like the most awesome feeling to get that action figure. I still remember going into Toys R Us with my mom or with my dad. My dad would pick me up sometimes for, or visitation and take me, to the store on my birthday or one of those things. And being in Toys R Us and seeing all of those, vintage Star Wars figures, on the peg. And then, just opening those up and then really just looking at the figure, right? And you're looking at the figure, and as a kid, you're really admiring it. And, you had no articulation, right? You had like you had the little lightsaber that, went up and down, inside the arm. You can move the leg, you could turn the head, you can move the arm. But there was a certain joy in that. And then not to segue into other things, but certainly when I discovered Hot Toys, I will tell you, and we get into this whenever you want, I did get that joy back at obviously a much older age.
With Hot Toys.
With Hot Toys.
With Hot Toys. So you were able to recapture that emotional connection with Hot Toys.
Yeah.
It's Hot Toys is a gateway drug. It's once you experience it and then you understand the fanfare and the excitement behind it. It is a slippery slope. It really is. I remember in the 80s, we didn't have a lot of money, and the Star Wars vintage action figures that I remember that I was able to afford were the ones that were discounted. So this probably would have been right after Return of the Jedi. So 85, 86, where you'd go to a Woolworth, a Walgreens, and they'd be for $1 and so forth. So I always had the characters in my little bucket were never the A-list characters. They were more of like 99, like the robot and the droids and the background alien creatures that were probably discounted for. I remember one of the photos from my childhood. It was like 80 cents. I mean, these were the discounted bargain bin collectors. So it was something that I remembered. It was something that, like you mentioned with me, it brought me joy collecting Star Wars action figures. So reaching that age in the mid 90s with and having that disposable income and being reintroduced into Power of the Force, because by that time I was collecting action figures. I think I was going heavy into Star Trek at that point, but the Power of the Force was like, wow, it's back, it's coming back, and it kept getting better.
The orange cards, right? Yeah.
So that's right. The orange cards, Power of the Force, and then the next one was the green card. I forgot. Was it still Power of the Force? Was it called something else?
No, it was Power of the Force. Yep.
It was Power of the Force, right? So it got into segue. So it was one of those things that it was part of the hunt. It was part of the old school hunt, going out, getting them all, getting with the little film cell in them and packing them up. And I remember even putting them in Ziploc bags and spending that extra income. And I even had a sealer where you would remove the air and then you would seal it. I did a lot of that. Do you remember that? I forgot that unit. It's used in the kitchen, right? And then to remove air and seal it. I did all that. I did all that. I had boxes. By the early 2000s, Aries, I was using a remote storage, keeping them there, just hoarding them and stacking them and something. And it just, and I didn't wake up at that time. I was like, wow, this is just fun. And it wasn't until I made the move to Las Vegas and I spent a lot of money bringing a lot of that collection with me. And a year later, this is probably around 2006, and then 2007 and 8, when we needed to buy our first home, I go, that's okay. I'll just pull out the equity here. I'll do it for the family. I really don't want to sell my collection, and I'll do it. I'll take one for the team. My collection was it was my pride and joy that had been up to that point. I was collecting 10 plus years, and I had already been doing eBay since 2002, and seeing the value in 2008. For all those figures, we're talking the Phantom Menace. I had all of it. I had the Attack of the Clones. I had Revenge of the Sith. I had all of that. And seeing how the community saw the value, it just devastated me. It really did.
It really opens your eyes, doesn't it? I mean,
yeah. So I did my purge. I call it the purge, where I went from I liquidated probably about 90% of those action figures, and was in 2012. I go,
now, did it blow you away? What you couldn't get at, like what was the differential for you of what you thought you were going to get out of those until your eyes were open? Or I wasn't I was under a lot of so there was a semi purge for me. That was
2008, and then the biggest one was 2012. But it was devastating because when I sat down and I started doing the numbers, I'm like, because collectors, and I know there's a lot of them out there, you have to factor in remote storage. A lot of people don't, but when you have a collection in storage and you're paying $50 a month, or at the time, I think it's more now. That's what I was paying. That money that you're hemorrhaging is part of that collection's value. Does that make sense? That's how I took it. That's how I took it. So when these action figures that I collected for so long were only going for $1 to $2, it was heartbreaking because I think at that point, all I wanted was to break even, maybe even a little bit more. And it was hard. I mean, it was very hard.
And
it still hurt. I still am sour to this day about that.
Well, me too. And I don't know about you, because I know a lot of people collected those differently in different timelines. But for me and a lot of other collectors, there were a lot of chase figures with those collections. You know, you're bringing up the Phantom Menace, the Episode 1 figures, or the Power of the Jedi, or remember the freeze frame, you know, from the Power of the Force and all those.
That's right.
And some of those,
the freeze frame, yeah.
You know, some of those you couldn't get, you know, at the stores, or, you know, you would be using eBay at that time. Or, you know, paying a premium price trying to get some of these variants, like, you know, the different circle variants for the Boba Fetts, or, you know, these different, you know, long saber Darth Vader, short saber Darth Vader with the power of the Force, with the orange card, if you remember those variants or whatnot. And to see those even now, I mean, not going for what they did back then, it is kind of eye-opening and devastating in a way. So, you know, I think, you know, leading up to where you're leading up to, the reason I did what I did when we were leading, I mean, there was, you know, when you go through this enough times, you know, you start to realize when you're sucked in again. And then you're like, no, you fooled me once, you fooled me twice, maybe 3 times, 4 times. Eventually, you start wising up.
Yeah, and it really is. And I don't know if it's so much the Star Wars IP. I blame a lot of it. You know, I always point the finger at Hasbro. Just they are a marketing genius. I mean, a lot of toy companies went out of business last year. I don't know if you're aware of that. There's 3 that I can think of. Replicas, Chronicle. But Hasbro was one of the companies that posted their best year ever.
Wow.
16%. It was astronomical.
I didn't realize that was one of their best years. Wow, really?
Yeah. And
that's during the COVID.
Yeah. And that was during COVID. That was absolutely during COVID. And so maybe it was the free time, maybe it was but I will say though, because it's collecting action figures, because I really am passionate about 1/6 scale, but it's still for me hard to say no to action figures. Do you still come across that, Aries, or is it just me? It's still hard to say no.
It's hard to say no, and I think that for some of us, there's different foundations, or even some foundations from the past that kind of, you know, you talk about, you know, you blame Hasbro for this type of thing, and you know, and Hasbro purchased Kenner, which really started these action figure you know, collecting for Star Wars, and I think that, and I mentioned it in that video as well. You know, for me, when I was collecting it as a kid. And then even when I was a teenager, you know, going into, you know, a lot of those stores, as you mentioned, and of course the, you know, the Power of the Force line, with the coins, before they were out, you know, you would still be picking all of those up, even well into the very late 80s and the early 90s. And, you know, you'd be ripping up the packaging out of the joy you would get from playing with the action figures. And you know what's very interesting back then is all of those were, and not to bring this up, but all of those were reissues. after reissue after reissue, and nobody cared.
Nobody cared.
Nobody cared. They just it was a different time. But then what people started to get wind of when the Power of the Force orange cards started coming out was, wait a minute, there's no more of these 70s and 80s action figures in the packaging anymore.
Yeah.
Because everybody ripped them open. And why, Denobi? Because they loved them. They didn't just keep them in the packaging. And I think part of what you're saying here, like what happened, I think that there's almost like when the Power of the Force orange card and green cards came out, and then all the other stuff, like to start off with them, people were almost like, oh, you got to get these because they're going to be worth all this money in 20 years. They're going to be worth all this money in 30 years. But then nobody started to open them up anymore because they wanted to keep them in the package. And that went on when you're talking about when you were collecting the episode 1 figures and the Attack of the Clones figures. And then the Power of the Jedi figures and all that stuff then. And it's almost like, oh, you got to keep these in the package and hoard these all up. They're not worth a darn thing.
No, they're not.
Because
no.
Yes.
There's a wake-up call. Yeah.
So here's the thing with Hot Toys, because you're doing the same thing with the Black Series. Now, the Black Series is unique. It's unique because, like some of the other lines that are already in 6-inch figures, with the GI, with some of the other figures that have been out for years, instead of
GI Joe, Marvel, it's the same formula. Transformers, it's the same formula that happens in the Transformers kit. It's just reissue after reissue, and unless you have an epic piece, like a Kickstarter item or HasLab, it's not going to hold its value. And it takes a lot. I mean, the only other type of collecting I see like that would be like the vinyl pops. It'll never end. It'll just be reissues and different characters and so forth. It still hurts. I mean, Aries, I put so much work, and at that time when I was collecting and I was preserving the Attack of the Clone figures and the ships and Revenges, I wasn't worried about that reselling or profit. That wasn't in my head at that point. That wasn't the intention. I had kept them for a little over a decade at that point, so there was no plans. It was the fact that I had a family. For me, the family comes first, and it was a somewhat family emergency. It was a big purchase to purchase our first home, and we were scrounging our pennies. And I thought it was something that I could count on. It really was, and it still hurt. I mean, I thought that, well, I'll go ahead and I'll sell this and I'll do it for the family. And seeing that they were worth $1, I mean, some of those things were near mint, and it got to the point where I was just selling them in a lot for about $1.50 a piece for a lot of Attack of the Clones, and I will probably get people and putting comments. I'm like, well, it's different now. Well, yeah, generations and so forth, and there are new collectors now with disposable income that probably may want those early connections. But at that time, 2008, 2012, no. And to give you an extra point, for you, Aries, in your video, you went in, you pulled up the real market value on eBay with some of that stuff, and to play fair, every now and then there is a chase figure out of 10, 15, I think you said, or something like that. There's always going to be one, but is it enough to justify collecting, reserving the space to have, because it was the whole idea of the whole Black Series and those lines was to have that unique special character, or not to have Farm Boy Luke multiplied and reissued in 7 different incarnations and so forth. I mean, it stings. It just, I don't know. For me, it still stings. It really does. And no, go ahead.
No, and I think, you have to wonder, Denobi, is it possible that the reason why this is the way it is in collecting is because of that narrative from the 90s of you've got to collect these Star Wars figures because of what they're going to be worth. And in the early 2000s, because, you know, I really do think that there's something there where, you know, whether it's subconsciously or, you know, within the culture of collecting Star Wars, where we think we are going to go ahead and collect these action figures and they're going to be worth something because they're Star Wars figures, and you know, you keep them in the package and so on and so forth. And again, segueing back to, you're saying like it was fun for you to collect them and open them up, and it was fun for me to collect them and open them up. And I think that there was a false narrative, and I think Hasbro knows about this as well, that, you know, they can reissue, like you said, all those Farm Boy Lukes. How many, you know, there's many different variants that they could come out with. You've got to get every single variant, and who knows what variant is going to be worth this much money or that much money or that much money. And I can't tell you how many Black Series collectors that I talk to, not all of them, but a very, very large percentage, and I know it would be over 50%, keep them in the actual package. And there's actually no joy. It's almost like you should open up your own store. You just went ahead and, you know, bought all of these, and now you could go ahead and open it. You got enough product to, you know, have a, you know, get a flea market booth for a couple of months, or, you know, maybe open up a store in that regard. But again, and we'll get, I'm sure you'll get into this with Hot Toys. There's a reason why Hot Toys does not have the same effect, though, as what we're talking about here. But that's what I was doing with Black Series, right? I was collecting all the Black Series and hoarding them all like a dragon would hoard the treasure. And really be like, oh, that looks really nice. Let me go ahead and put that on the shelf. Let me keep these in the boxes. Oh, we were talking about areas to store them. Let me store them in boxes. I had every Black Series figure that there was. And I'm like, wow, I mean, I'm just kind of doing this to have the collection, but I can't display the whole collection. I'm afraid to take it out of the box.
That's what it was. That's exactly what it was. A lot of it, because I did have shelves of displays with a lot of those characters, but yeah, they were real estate hogs. They took up a lot of space, and it got to the point where you were just boxing them, and you were essentially building walls. And I had that walk-in closet that was just brick by brick piled up and so forth. And it's I think I stopped with the Black Series after that. And then in recent years, every now and then, I'll slip and I'll hit the bottle and I'll pick up one if I'm at GameStop or something. But I still stick with my philosophy. I love Star Wars, but I don't trust it. I don't. I got burned multiple times. That's why I've always treated buying Star Wars merchandise very different, very conservative. I'm not going to get them all. Hot Toys is probably a little bit more safer, but yeah, when it comes to Hasbro, and you know, every now and then I brought this out. Every now and then I'm at a GameStop or something, and then I'm like, oh, this looks really cool, and I'll pick it up.
Yeah,
and
very good packaging.
Yeah,
that's a new one. That's the new packaging they just came out with throughout last year or so.
Yeah, and then I'll stop and I'll go in and I'll stop and go in. I'm a big. I do like their. It's tough. I mean, Hasbro. And just to disclose to everybody, I do invest with Hasbro. I've been a shareholder with them for 20-something years. I figured if I was going to give them my money, let me at least own a part of the company. That's the way I saw it with Hasbro. So I do like their HasLab campaign. I do like that.
I like that too, actually.
Yeah, I do. I did back the Razor Crest, so I do look forward to that. If they can segregate a collector's market and then a regular I think that's the way to go. But what do I know? They had their best year last year during a pandemic. So whatever they're doing, even with all the complaints, and you're aware of the complaint, distribution in stock, it doesn't matter. They still get your money. They still, like you were to a credit to you, where you can never find them on the shelves, and you have to resort to pre-order, and you have to resort to eBay and secondary markets to get them. In the end, they always make their money. It's just how it is. So
well, and they do a really good job, I feel like, with their vintage collection, which they brought back again. And then luckily, for collectors, there's not, or they don't think there's a huge market for 3 3/4 inch figures. So they're not focusing on that as much as the Black Series, but that's actually a really, really good line. And I think the best line to collect if you're going to be collecting Hasbro action figures. And I think that there is, something, of value there for the future.
Somewhat. If anything, it'll hold its retail.
But it's Hasbro. But it's Hasbro is the thing, right?
Yeah.
If you noticed that they're already reissuing Kenner figures, and they could say that the mold is slightly different. No, it's not. It's the same action figures that came out in the late 70s and 80s. So nothing is safe with them.
Yeah.
But, one thing with the Black Series, you were bringing up that new packaging. And I know in that new packaging, they reissued some Rebels figures. And for instance, one of them was Ezra.
Ezra Miller.
And that figure, Denobi, was going for, $200 to $300. It was very, very valuable. And then they came out with the new packaging of the new photo reel, which whatever they did with that figure. And now, people are, it's not worth that much anymore. They can't get rid of them. And when I was looking at Black Series, to go back to the previous question, I was thinking back to what you said about episode 1, the Phantom Menace figures. You said
it's a glorious time. It was so much fun.
Right, but they're not worth anything anymore.
But they're not worth anything. Not worth anything. At the time, you didn't think about that, but they took up. I mean, you can still get some of those figures from the Phantom Menace still sealed in boxes, still in the original retail. Isn't that crazy? I couldn't believe that.
Crazy.
That's crazy. 20 years ago, a lot of, and that's the thing too, that as the years went by, I learned a lot of collectors hoarded everything with the Phantom Menace. I mean, to the point where it's what's the term in retail? Old new merch or something like that. Old new. There's a slang where new merchandise gets discovered in a warehouse, so it's considered new old.
Yeah, I know it should be, but it's escaping me too. But yeah.
Yeah, and you can still get that from the Phantom Menace. I mean, you can relive the 1999 year, and it's just no, you're collecting all that stuff, and it takes up a lot of space. You're taking up a lot of resources and stuff like that. That's one of the reasons too. I purged comic books. Comic books. I woke up from that. I was a big comic book collector in the 90s, and that was a wake up call too. That was early on, but I woke up from that a little bit earlier. I enjoyed collecting. I adored reading comic books, and then 2005 or 6 when when I was selling them, and they were going for about 25 cents a piece. I'm like, no, I'm done with this. It's just
and I think that for both, it's not like you want to collect, and you want them to be worth something, or at least be able to get your money back when you're going ahead and trying to transition out of it. And for me, like you mentioned with the episode 1 figures, I think that people were, you're talking about those cases, and people were hoarding cases. They were trying to recapture the phenomenon of the 12 backs or the 20 backs.
Yeah.
And when the Boba Fett came out, made it the 21 backs, and it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't meant, to recapture that time. What wasn't going to happen again. People caught on to, what the lore was and what happened back then with people ripping these open. But, I also collected the Unleashed line. I
Yep.
collected many other of
Yeah.
lines, and then they weren't worth anything. And when I'm looking at the Black Series, and I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, this is fresh. Star Wars and 6-inch action figures. And then I'm starting to see these prices and then these trends of Hasbro pumping these out and pumping
Yep.
these out and pumping these out, and then seeing these prices plummet. I'm like, wow, I'm chasing I don't know about you, Denobi, but I couldn't hunt down every Black Series figure, at the stores, whether it was Walmart, Target, Toys R Us at some points in the beginning. You would be paying, those are $20 a piece to begin with, retail,
Yeah.
maybe more. And then you start wind up paying $30, $40, maybe even more on some of these variant figures. And then you see Jyn Erso for $1.99 at Five Below.
Yeah. And she's coming back. I still keep up with that news, and they're reissuing the whole Rogue One series again. So, just to let the audience know, when did you make the purge? What year? Because I'll never forget. For me, it was 2012 was the biggest. 2012 was like, I'm done. That's when I transitioned and I started buying Hot Toys. What year was it for you? When did you like wake up?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah,
On Black Series?
yeah, from Black Series into Hot Toys full force
Last year.
last year. Nice.
Last year with
Yeah.
Black Series. I mean, I've done it before with the other ones that I've mentioned, and for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
But I started to get really, really skittish with the Black Series. And because you look back, I started to put two and two together. You remember some of these exclusives that used to be out, like you talk about Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
They had that Celebration exclusive George Lucas. They called it George Sackle in the TIE fighter pilot outfit. That was what they called it. Was a special, Rebel Alliance, fighter pilot. You would have the Darth Vader, the Celebration Silver exclusives, and a lot of these figures. And, they're going for, $100, $200, $300 and, big money back then. And then you're not seeing them move. And I started to say, wait a minute. It's almost like I had to wake up again from a dream.
Yeah.
All of these Black Series figures, and I'm collecting them through time. I'm going to move these and I'm going to get $400 for what I think is $5,000 with all these exclusives too from these conventions. And, whether you can go to San Diego Comic-Con or not, but, you buy it off somebody online and they're waiting in line to, get some of these exclusives and stuff like that. So I started to be like, I don't want to be in a position again where I was with the Unleashed, where I was with the episode 1 figures, for instance, or I was with this line and that line, where I was just like you. And I'm like, man, this is kind of a little bit discouraging to spend all this time.
Yeah.
And then to see a plummet like that. And I said, I am going to get out of this right now because it's the same story. It's all about keeping them in the package.
Yeah.
And hoarding it like a dragon. And again, it was all based on, for me, the joy when I had a kid from getting the figures and then being like, wow, I've got them in the package. I'm kind of doing the adult collecting now and trying to recapture that magic. But really, that didn't happen until Hot Toys. But that's when I got out of Black Series.
So you were part of the 2020 transition then. I didn't know. Yeah. 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 A lot of people had a lot. Maybe that was it. Maybe it was just the distraction, less distractions in people's lives, working from home. Yeah, it was pretty positive. That was one of the biggest reasons. Being at home and working on your collection and your hobby and so forth. And just to let the audience know, what me and Aries are talking about, it wasn't about collecting and flipping them. It's just when you're spending $20 on an action figure and then 3 months down the road, it's on Amazon for $13. And then you ask yourself, well, why did I pay the $20 when it's being discounted on Amazon? It's that mentality, that it's that concern where, well, why did I pre-order this 8-figure box set of Black Series when it's being discounted on Big Bad Toy Store now 3 months later? Did I need it in that big of a hurry? It's that situation. It's about curating your collection. It's about managing your displays. It begins to sour is what it is. You're like, this isn't working. I'm not Yeah, and it's not about, oh, I want to make the money. It's not about that. It's like, well, why am I buying this if it's not worth the money I spent and so
Right.
forth? And every now and then there may be a chase variant where you have to visit every stinking Walgreens in the city to find, or spend the $60 on eBay, and then 6 months later Hasbro decides to reissue it again. It's that, right? It's that crap that bugs me, that bugged you, right?
Well, no, and exactly right. And you bring up a great point about it's not really about reselling them. It's about like sometimes when you go to an event with your significant other, or sometimes you're going in some cases you want to look good, and it's not like it's vanity. It's just that you want to look good. And sometimes when you're at a day at work, you feel good about that day at work. Like, wow, I really accomplished a lot today. You feel good. And the same point you're bringing about, when you're collecting these figures, even if you're not flipping them, you certainly want to feel like, oh, they're worth something.
Yeah.
It's good to know that what I got on the shelf, or what I got in the closet, or what I got stored in the box is worth something, even if you're not really doing it to flip it. It's just you feel good about yourself. You feel good about the money you're putting out over there. But this was, that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
You can't do it with this.
No, you really can. You can't curate a collection and find joy in it if it's not being managed right. It's really what it is. And like, this isn't, you wake up and you're like, this isn't working. It's taking up way too much space. That's why I've always told collectors that if you have to resort to using a remote storage unit for boxes and boxes of action figures, you're essentially just throwing money down the drain. You really are.
Yeah. And what's really interesting? It's channels such as yours too, which really inspired me, because as I'm going through this realization, and you might laugh at this, but I've been following Hot Toys for a number of years. And one of the interesting things that really struck me about Hot Toys was everybody takes them out of the darn box. Now, I found that to be very fascinating. But here's the thing. That brings me back to when I was a kid. All I wanted to do was open up the figures and play with them and hold them in my hand. And then I'm watching channels like yours. Okay, here's this review on Han Solo from A New Hope, or Chewbacca, and I'm like, man, these guys are awesome. Look at everybody reviewing these figures and having so much fun. And look at how these head sculpts. It looks like you're holding Harrison Ford or Carrie Fisher in your hand. And the boxes are nice, but you could take these out of the box. What the heck am I doing? Because what brought me the joy, and what I've been trying to recapture, was that magic from when I was a child. I mean, these are toys we're collecting, and from when I was a teenager, and for me, that's what Hot Toys does, and it allows me to take it out of the package. And now it's like, at my older age, I'm like, wow, this really looks like the real person. We've come a long way since the Kenner days, baby. But I'm doing the same thing I did in the Kenner days, baby. I'm opening it up.
Yeah. You're enjoying it. It's that joy of posability, playing with it and so forth. And that's something that you can kind of get in a 1/6 scale form, and that's something that Hot Toys has mastered. They're not the most perfect company, but my God, they've really mastered the ability to get us to click and buy the product. And it's for me, my segue drug was Iron Man, right? It was I had always known about Hot Toys, the actual company, probably since 2008, because I had never missed a San Diego Comic-Con toy convention. It's next door. I always attended it. My first time I ever missed it was last year because of the pandemic. Yeah. So I had always visited the Sideshow booth. I'd always taken photos. I'd always admired the products and so forth. And it wasn't until they made the leaps and bound with the Iron Man Mark II Unleashed figure, that when I opened that figure up, that Hot Toys up, and I was just blown away. I'm like, wow, what have I been missing? Like the amount of detail. I mean, this is back in 2012. Like I had never experienced. The Mark II Unleashed is probably the worst figure to segue into Hot Toys because it is very overwhelming. You can remove the armor. There's detail underneath the detail. It was just something that I had never experienced before. You can remove the helmet. You can remove the body parts, and there's exposed wiring. I just blew me away. So it was Marvel all the way, and then it just kept getting better, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But between that time of 2012 and 2017, we'd always get a few knick-knack scattered Star Wars pieces from Hot Toys, but I never felt the community paid attention to it. It really wasn't until the Mandalorian kind of brought the joy back, because even during the prequel sequels, it was very hit or miss. It was, even selected reviewers didn't really want to. If anything, now I think I see it more, where people are kind of going back and doing some re-reviews. But back in those, like I was sharing the story with the boys last night, PJ and Nate, where I remember the Anakin Skywalker, the Darkseid Hot Toys. I picked that up. That was a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive. I'm like, cool. I'm attending the show. I went up to the booth and I picked mines up. And behind the curtain to the sideshow booth, there was about 100 units back there. And like, wow, they're going to sell through all this? They didn't. 2 weeks later, they ended up on the website for Sideshow. And they sat on that Sideshow website for 6 months to a year. I want to say it was closer to a year, but they did not sell out. This is 2017, I think, 2000, right there. Yeah, so it's it's the resurgence of the new collectors that have joined in probably in the last 48 months, I would speculate, that has really driven up the price, and the Mandalorian has made Star Wars collecting again and so forth. And, someone like me that's been down that road, that's why I've always steered toward the road of very cautious, very conservative. I'm like, Star Wars, you fooled me a couple times. I see through the lies of the Jedi. You won't fool me, So I see.
Then you are lost.
Yeah, you won't fool me. And so it's like, I'm gonna keep 1 foot in here, 1 foot out, so that way if the ship does sink, like, you're not gonna break my heart again, Star Wars. You will not do that again. But if you're a new collector and you've just joined the last 48 hours, and you see this amount of pre-orders, you would think that Hot Toys is just Star Wars. Yeah, I wouldn't blame you if you just joined. If you've only been collecting Hot Toys in the last 48 months, and you see the 30, I think we're up to 36, not counting the ones that have been delivered in the US.
Yeah, I think that's right.
You would think, wow, Hot Toys is just Star Wars. Whoa. It's not the case. And, it's always been Marvel. But I can see that, and I can see the confusion and so forth. So hopefully that shares a little bit of insight how I treat that specific IP, because I'm not that cautious with DC and Marvel. I'm a little bit more relaxed with those IPs, with Hot Toys. When I mean Hot Toys, DC IP and then the Marvel IP. But when it comes to Star Wars, I'm like, I don't know. You burned me with that Snowtrooper prequel sequel that I took a hit selling. I bought that 2-pack. I mean, I got caught up in that prequel sequel hype, where I bought the Finn and the 2-pack Snowtroopers, and then a year later I tried selling it. I took a big hit, and I go, Denobi, you have no one to blame but yourself. This is Star Wars. Mm-hmm. So I've been burnt in the action figure world with Star Wars, and I've also been burnt with Hot Toys Star Wars. So
and I think that it's very interesting with the sequels with Star Wars Hot Toys, or with anything. But you bring up also an interesting point from before, is I really think that one of the we don't talk about it a whole lot. I haven't heard a whole lot within the community, but that vintage color Boba Fett, when that came out last May 4th, and when that was announced, and also the Darth Vader in that 40th anniversary packaging, I really do believe it brought a lot of collectors over.
Yeah.
From the Black Series and a lot of that into it because of the packaging. And I think also what they discovered as well is, sure, you could keep it in that packaging, but you have most of them now just opening up that packaging. The packaging is sturdy enough. It's nice enough where you can just put it in the shelf or put it away in your box or whatnot, but take the toy out.
Yeah.
And kind of free yourself from this prison.
Yeah.
And I could tell you that I'll never forget. I had, when you're selling some of these online, and if you're using eBay, you remember specific buyers. And I remember when I was selling a Black Series Emperor, from, I think it was an Amazon exclusive.
Yeah.
And I had this guy, really, really nice.
Yeah.
But he was like, hey, is this minty, mint, mint, mint? And not one speckle scratch on this corner, and not one little smudge on this thing. And I'm reading this out. I'm like, is this guy trying to buy an AFA 90 Luke Skywalker double telescoping lights? I'm just like, dude, this ain't going to be worth nothing in 10 years. It's going to be like your half-circle Boba Fett, baby. And I was just like, wow, I am so glad I'm getting out of that. But just, bringing that up, I do think that vintage color Boba Fett, what Hot Toys did there with coming out with the 40th anniversary packaging, and maybe I'm wrong, but from what I'm seeing in the community, and especially with new collectors, I see people that collecting them, taking them out of the packaging like I did.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Very seldom removing a Hot Toys out of packaging will affect its value. If anything, maybe slightly, but you're still gonna recapture that. So it's like the Empire Strikes Back Vader, which got reissued, because I ended up buying the first version of that. That's, by the way, folks, Empire Strikes Back Darth Vader was reissued. That was a regular version, and then they did the 40th anniversary. So I have the first version of that, and that sat. It's crazy because that didn't sell right away. That did not sell right away. That was stock on Sideshow. So I remember all that. Yeah, I remember that. And one of the things I try to share with you, Aries, and Nate from Geeking Out, Don, to anybody else that really wants to listen, is this boom that we're going through with Star Wars, the 34 plus pre-orders that are on there, is this kind of like a housing market bubble, right? You can, we can speculate, right? A lot of people in the community do not think so, because the Mandalorian is a very strong IP, which I agree. I love the Mandalorian. I've fallen in love with the Mandalorian, but I still don't trust Star Wars, the merchandising aspect of it, because I don't forget about certain characters that are considered grails now that sat for almost a year. Emperor Papa Palpatine sat for almost a year. I remember that. Now he's going for buku bucks, but Palpatine with the chair sat for. It sat for a while. You could have gotten it on Big Bad Toy Store. It was just. But
I got it for retail last year, believe it or not.
Yeah,
at retail. The deluxe one.
Yeah, and it's just exactly with the chair, and now it's buku money,
Yeah.
So I go, is this, and I'm looking at this because I've been doing this a while. Like, is this a genuine, real value, or is this an artificial spike that the minute that the community is bent out of shape over someone getting fired in Star Wars, is it going to pop? Right? It's very different, Star Wars.
A lot of variables.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables, and that's one of the things I enjoy about your show, is that you tend to point that out. There is a lot of ups and downs. We perfect example of the bubble. Well, I wouldn't say a bubble, but more of a up and down, is the original Mandalorian from Hot Toys. That's
Sure.
such an unstable figure in the secondary market. I can't lock in my coordinates on that. I still don't know why it's doing that.
Yeah, it's all over the place. It's like the force is strong with the
Yeah,
OG Mandalorian, and not the way that we're thinking.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I'm seeing that one kind of. I still hold the same position on that, and I even mentioned it again, or I mentioned it in the episode I came out with my podcast this week. I think one of the things that figure has fallen victim to is the amount of uh, how many Beskar Mandos Hot Toys has made, and now those are in stock at Sideshow, and you
yeah,
can go ahead and spend. Remember that collectors at first glance, and I
yeah,
know that a lot of reviewers have said, okay, I think the OG Mando actually pops out more in the display, but from a fan's perspective, when you look at OG Mando compared to Beskar Mando, it's like seeing Superman as Clark Kent in Smallville versus with the cape and out working at the Daily Planet. It's kind of like, oh no, I want the upgraded version.
hmm,
And I think the same thing is kind of happening right now. It's like, well, I could go spend $350, or I was spending $400 on an OG Mando, or I can just get this two Grogus and this really
yeah,
cool Superman Cape One Mando for $315. What are you going to buy? For a lot of them, they're going to buy
yeah.
the one that's in stock. So I think that's what's happening right now. But
Oh,
I
I
do,
see. I
yeah,
got you. I got you. If you have new collectors that are being, that's right. That would make sense that you would, that they, if they want a Mandalorian, which again, there's nothing wrong with the best car Mandalorian. It's
no,
beautiful
I got
figure.
it.
Yeah. I just, for me, it's every Mandalorian version, which I know Hot Toys will screw me in the wallet because I know they're going to release probably two more versions of the Mandalorian, and then the fifth one will be when we finally get the head sculpt. Right? I'm assuming that'll be the because everyone's going to want that Pedro Pascal head, right? So, um,
Well, I'm thinking they got to put that one out with this swoop bike version. I mean, I don't know who's going to buy it. I mean, if you take a look at it, and I think you and I have talked about this before. When you look at Quill and the Blurg, and you look at the OG Mando and the Blurg, they're not
yeah,
exactly doing what Nightmare Batman and Darkseid Superman or the
mm-mm.
some of these other 2-packs like the Boba Fett are doing. I mean, they're low. And you got those two Mandalorians right now, the two Beskar Mandalorians available at a cheaper price. I
Yeah,
almost feel like they got to give you the Pedro Pascal head sculpt with the bike
yeah,
if they come out. I'm thinking that might not, but I think that's the smart move.
yeah. So, folks, to kind of add a little more detail to what Aries pointed out. So, there's two versions of the Beskar. If anybody's learning or trying to understand what we're talking about, so there is a Hot Toys Beskar Mandalorian regular version, and then there is a Beskar Mandalorian Deluxe. And then the Deluxe is the one that comes with the crib, right, with the little floaty pod thing.
Yeah, the little crib that floats with yep.
You
Hmm.
get the floaty pod, and then you get a bonus Grogu.
Hmm.
Okay. And you get a bonus Grogu. Some folks may not see the value in that, and some folks may very well, because you wouldn't. I think the savings is what, a $30 savings on it. It's not much of a big savings from the regular version to the deluxe version.
Well, you do get some of those accessories like the bucket, whatever you call that thing that he
The
carried.
hover pod, the little baby crib, or the
Yeah, but also where he held the best car.
oh, the ice cream
Like,
maker.
yeah,
Yeah,
the ice cream
yeah,
maker from it. Yeah,
yeah, the ice cream maker. That's right. You do get that. So yeah, that's actually pretty cool. Yeah,
yeah.
I would say, yeah, I would definitely get the deluxe. So then what happens to the regular? So then the regular one is still sitting on the shelf, and then that can very well affect the value as well too.
Hmm.
And until they, because they haven't, and that's the thing too. As far as Hot Toys is concerned, they could announce another Mandalorian pre-order with this one still sitting on the shelves,
Yeah,
lingering. Yeah, yeah,
I think that's gonna happen.
I think so too.
But I think the OG Mando at the end of the day, I do think it'll be a $400 tier range figure, a figure that's going to be when it's all said and done, and once those best car Mandalorians, whatever they sell out or go on wait list at Sideshow, I think that's what's eventually going to happen. Because you could still pick it up with the Blurg right now, but that set is very, very pricey. So there's going to be
It's a
yeah,
very pricey set. I think out of all the Mandalorians, it's probably going to climb the highest. It's probably going to be the original. I'm thinking that's the one. If any new collectors anybody that just starts watching The Mandalorian from the very beginning, anybody that just segues into this show, it's really, I mean, that first season in that armor and you've seen his progression, I think is probably going to be the one for me anyway, that has the most emotional connection. I like the Beskar armor, I really do. I think it's a nice piece, but that original Mandalorian is definitely going to be killer. And I don't, and you mentioned this too in one of your streams, that even with the Mandalorian on the blurb, it really, I don't think it'll affect the price. And I agree with you on that. I think it's two separate things, two separate SKUs, two MMS, and we still don't know what accessories or whatever, and we don't know if the body's going to be modified to fit on the blurb properly. It may not. If the body is modified, if they do include a custom tailored pants that is designed to sit on that blurb, technically it is going to be a different figure.
You're exactly right. It's a different variant, right there. But, and I think you bring up a good point about, what does it mean for, Star Wars Hot Toys prices compared to Black Series and other things we're talking about. And I think it's a very unique situation with Hot Toys for a lot of reasons. Number one, it being Hot Toys and exactly what a Hot Toy is compared to other things. But as far as Lucasfilm and Disney go, you have to look at it this way. You've got that Book of Boba Fett, which really, to me, is a season of The Mandalorian. I really think that that's what that's going to be. It's going to kind of like be an off season of The Mandalorian there. And then you're going to have, and they already finished production, I heard, on that, unless I heard wrong.
No, you're right.
Have, the Obi-Wan series. You're going to have that. You're going to have, the Ahsoka series. You're going to have the Cassian Andor series. You're going to have the Lando series. You're going to have this Acolyte series, which is probably going to focus on, I would think, a younger Yoda anyway, before his Jedi Council days when he was on the road like a young Obi-Wan and Anakin. You're going to have just a plethora of content that's coming out, not even including the movie that whatever the Rogue pilot movie, whatever they're coming out with that they announced whenever that was.
Like a Rogue One or something. With Patty, isn't Patty directing it, or she? I think that's exactly right. So as far as like the momentum and the hype, just like you're seeing with what they're doing already with these Marvel series, like WandaVision, and so on and so forth, I think Disney is going to push this forward in such a way where, it's going to be very interesting. There's 36 pre-orders right now. At 36, including the ones that have not shipped. So I count the ones that have not arrived in the US. So I count like the speeder bike. I don't have the speeder bike. So I still count the speeder bike as not being shipped to me. Even though I think I was just told by a couple of collectors that they just started this week. Great. But I'm still going to count it because it hasn't been shipped yet.
Right.
Yeah. I haven't received it yet. So the speeder bike, and there's two variants to that too. There's a speeder bike with the trooper, and then there's just the trooper by himself, right? What else? IG 11.
Yeah.
I have him on pre-order. I'm still counting him. Yeah. I have him on. Have you received yours? I have not.
No.
So I still count those, even though they've been released and there's been sporadic arrivals. Well, that's great, but it's about 36 because I'm still counting. It's probably 35 because I was at one point counting the 1/1 scale Hot Toys Grogu, and he was a late arrival, but and so was a Heavy Mandalorian. So, but it's still it's around 35 because they're still shipping Heavy Mandalorians. People that have pre-ordered it are still. It's a mind-boggling character of the whole backstory of the Mandalorian, of the heavy infantry Mandalorian.
Yeah, the heavy infantry Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's IG 11. There's still a lot. I have they haven't started shipping the Kylos and the Rays from Sideshow, right?
No.
Yeah. So that's part of that list too. So it's probably still about 36. It's still up there. It's definitely above 35 because I still count those characters that have not arrived and shipped from Sideshow, even though
Right.
they've arrived. So it's quite a lot. It's a lot. So that's where the whole Chicken Little mentality for me comes from, because I don't trust any of this. This doesn't seem right. I know if you and I totally sympathize, and I can completely understand brand new collectors that have just joined in the last 48 months, maybe less, and you just see all this like, wow, this is so much better. And I'm like, this is not the norm. This is off. This is very different. Is it going to continue? I don't know. Is it going to pop? I don't know. Once all these pre-orders start to ship, is it just going to sit and lag on the Sideshow shelves and kill the secondary market? And then what happens when the secondary market dips below? Then you start to see collectors tapping out. So, I mean, I don't know. This is so, Aries, this is very unusual.
It is. It's very unusual times. Yeah. And also, pointing that out, besides the points that you made, which really makes it tricky, for lack of a better word, but I think that's a good word with it, tricky to predict. You do have this situation where you still have a lot of controversy left over from the sequels. And I believe that Disney knows that. And they're coming out with all this new content. And I brought this up. You'll hear me say it again. You got that cold front from all the controversy. And then you got all the excitement of Mandalorian and all this stuff. And it kind of mixes together. And like a storm, like a hurricane, you don't necessarily know which way or where it's going to land or how it's going to land or what effect it's going to have. The one thing that I am pretty sure about is I do think Disney is going to take very careful care, and I think that that's why they have Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau involved and some of the folks that they do, to kind of have these future Star Wars, like they've done with Mandalorian, hit off with the same type of satisfaction that Marvel has seen throughout the last several years. And if that is the case, you are still going to get a lot of collectors, because as iffy as Hot Toys can be, and as frustrating with waiting on some of these, and you're talking about whether it's 35, I think that can go up to 55,
it
65.
Probably will.
I think it will. How much better is the alternatives? How much better is Hasbro? How much better are some of these other things that some of us anyway got really, really tired of? Now you can jump into statues. But for me, I put statues in as Norman Rockwell's or Pablo Picasso's. That's where I classify them for me. I have family members that do that, but that's not a toy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to articulate the statue of Rocky in Philadelphia. That's a statue. Just like the palm tree in the fake palm tree in my porch. I'm not going to play with that. I'm going to look at that. Yeah. But I am going to play with that hot toy because it's an action figure. Yeah. And it's a better action figure than what Hasbro's putting out.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. And the detail and the schematics and how many buttons are on the coat, the type of belt, everything. It's that attention to detail that once you get into this world, you really start to appreciate, and then you really start to understand the why they cost so much and so forth, and why they tend to hold value and why they're highly sought after and so forth. It's I see all that. I see all these new Star Wars shows coming up, and that it's that what has me entering with shields up. I'm 100% yellow alert because it's very abnormal. It's very unusual. They're going very heavy. We still have a lot of characters from the Marvel universe that have not been released, that are going on 2+ years, but yet they're doubling down. It's kind of like it's kind of like when Obi-Wan is telling Anakin, like, Anakin, they all see it, that he's corrupt. Why can't you? And that's and
Well,
it's like, because nothing feels right. Last year, and I get it, last year was a very unique year. Multiple companies did not survive. It's just, it's very, the year before that, we lost one of our best retailers. Was it 2018 or 2019? Toys R Us. When did Toys R Us leave us?
oh gosh, that was 20.
Was it 2018?
I want to say 19. Maybe it was 18.
2018 or 19. It feels like it was the year before the end of the world, I want to say.
Yeah.
And I knew, I knew it was going to be devastating for the collector community. Yeah, I knew that was going to create a rift, and I knew it was going to have Amazon keep control and screw around with the inventory and the whole pricing situation.
Had a huge impact.
Yeah. So we have 2 years here. Is it 2017 6L Collector Toys R Us left us, or is it 2018? We need someone in the community to fact check that. I feel it was 2018 Toys R Us left us. I want to say.
That sounds about right. That sounds about right. 2018.
Yeah. But
there was a long process, though. I don't think maybe did they all go out in 1 year? I knew there was some remnants left over.
Yeah.
As they were starting this process, but
yeah.
Yeah, that's a big thing too. You bring up a really good point, Denobi. The fact that, is it possible that with Toys R Us, and I know for me, when I was collecting Black Series and other lines, I would frequent there a lot, even though that wouldn't necessarily be the only place that I would frequent or I would buy. Did that have an effect in transitioning some people over to, Hot Toys and some of these more, exclusive comic shop type of deals here? Because I think maybe it had a factor as well. It could have.
It makes you, it's one of those situations, and it's a different atmosphere now, because you have GameStop merchandising, you have Walgreens, you have Target, you have Walmart, you have Amazon. It's not the same landscape as it was in the old days of the hunt, going out in the hunt.
So Barnes and Noble. I used to get some Black Series from Barnes and Noble, believe it or not.
Yeah, Barnes and Noble. That's right. They were one of the ones. So it's a different atmosphere. It really is. But
let me ask you this, or go ahead. I have for somebody who's been in Hot Toys for as long as you've been.
Yeah.
With the way Hot Toys approaches their action figures, and whether they, you're talking about toy companies going out and maybe reading into, is there something with them, something will buy out, will they expand, blah, blah, blah. They're very unique in the way, because you hear a lot about limited editions or, reissues and stuff like that. In a way, isn't every Hot Toy really unique? Because it's not that there is a machine that is pasting all the paint on each head sculpt. Like, let's take, the Captain Rex that's going to come on. It's actually, in a way, a painting, all unique, all to itself. Am I right or wrong?
No, you're right. Yeah, every Hot Toys character is very unique, and they use different methods in constructing that figure. Sometimes they'll use CAD designs, actual 3D molding from that was used. I know they did that for the Avatar film. Sometimes it's when it's typically a CG character, a character that's portrayed in film or in TV. Howard Chan, all these guys, they're on the set. I remember on social media that was one of the things that they bragged about, that they were on the set for Civil War. They're out there taking photos, measurements, and so forth. These guys from Hot Toys, they have access to this. They're taking these type of measurements. So depending on the character that they're portraying, if it's a human character, they'll take tons of pictures. They may scan the face, so forth. And then if it's a computer character, they'll usually have access to the CAD designs. That's why there was a character that it looked like it was Alita, the Hot Toys Alita. I mean, it looked like she was pulled right out of the film. I'm like, well, that's easy. They didn't have to sculpt anything. They clearly used the CAD design, the 3D CAD design, and they just popped it up, and they took a shortcut of molding the hair instead of rooting it like was in the film. So there's there's every figure. You're absolutely right, is very different. If it's a human face or a human actor, they're hand painted. Something that we talked about last night too, that a lot of people in the community aren't aware of, is that they outsource their head sculptors, right? They don't have sculptors on the books. It'll be different. That's why I was like, well, why is the head sculpt different from this Tony to this Tony? Well, they got a different guy or a girl. It's very different, and they disclose all that, all this information as to the different sculptors, the different painters, and so forth. That's all in the sideshow page. The where you're here, you can always see who makes this stuff. You can go, let's use Loki here. You can always click on Loki here, and you can go down and you can see who the head sculptor is right there. Right. So right here I'm pointing to, it's Lee Ji-ho. He is the head sculptor, right? So Lee Ji-ho, head sculptor, he's the one that's sculpted this Loki. All right, so we know it's Lee Ji-ho. Let's see if he is working on anything else with Hot Toys. How about Quill? Did Lee Ji-ho, is he the sculptor for Quill? Let's see who the sculptor is for this one here. This one has no information on the sculptor. So look at this one here. We don't know who the sculptor is for Quill. All right. So let's do another one. Let's do let's see, view all that's new here. Let's see if we can give you a different example. What else was released? You know what? Time for the search. Let's do Hot Toys Star Wars. Okay. So the Loki was Lee Ji-ho. Let's see if he is doing the sculpt for Ahsoka Tano. Let's see who the sculptor is for Ahsoka Tano, the human version. Is it the same sculptor? Or is it someone different? Will they tell us? They're not even telling us who the sculptor is. And that's actually very common too, by the way. Sometimes they will not disclose who their sculptor is. You know? Yeah. So
and sometimes they do. No, I know exactly where you're going with it.
Sometimes it could be, I'm guessing, I've always speculated it's a contractual situation where they may outsource it to somebody and they don't have to disclose it. Maybe the sculptor for a lower price point wants to get credit and for more work. So I mean that could be a situation too. Moff Gideon, who, let's see if the sculptor. So head painter. So here's a perfect look at this. So a different head sculptor right there. Boom. Juan Kim, a different head sculptor that's doing this one right here. So that was something that we had talked about last night, because I don't think that was something that was very well known in the community. Like, why do people look at, why do all the characters? Well, it's because they're independent contractors, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, from that Loki I showed you to this one here, Moff Gideon, they have two different head sculptors. And when they announced that Iron Man Mark V with the suit up, I'm like, wow, they found a savant genius sculptor, because I wanted to know who that was, and they're not disclosing it. So that could be a contractual situation where, we found a genius who can knock out the Robert Downey Jr. Head sculpt, but we're not going to tell you folks. So something to, if you're ever curious why the heads always look different, it's because they use independent contractors. The painter is very consistent though. J.C. Hong, he's the one that creates the blueprint for the actual paint, and then that gets passed on to the painters. But
it's each head sculpt is hand painted as well.
Yes. Each
can have a little bit of a variation, which I think a lot of people don't realize. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
And so here's a question I have for you, because I've been in light of all this, what you're showing and talking about the painting, something I've been tossing around my mind for a while is when you take a look at, like we were talking about at the onset of the program, the magic of Kenner action figures in the
Yeah.
70s and late 70s and 80s,
Mhm.
where people didn't realize what was going on. They were ripping open all the packaging. It was a phenomenon. It was kind of magic in a bottle for the future. I don't there for really for the there's nothing going on that is similar to Hot Toys on the level where in the action figure world for Star Wars on that level. Is it possible, Denobi, that when you were talking about value of Hot Toys, because that's one of the reasons what brought me into this,
Yeah.
was the individuality and the uniqueness. Like when I tell my
Yeah.
family members about this, they're like, holy smoke, you're
Yeah.
kidding. Each one of these, is
Yeah.
that where the rarity is, and not necessarily in the numbers? Is there something there long term that's just really different and unique at this point?
The Hot Toys has always been, they've always had a history of not overproducing. It wasn't until 2016 that they had their first reissue, which was the Han Solo and Chewbacca, that flipped the whole community. Because up until that point, the company started. Someone can correct me, but I want to say Hot Toys started in 2001 making Chinese knockoffs, and then they picked up a contract in 2004 or 5. But anyway,
Mhm.
when they started, they started under the formula of, hey, let's put out a pre-order for X amount of time, close it off, we'll make the batch, and then we'll move on to the next figure. So that's where the value was, meaning that regardless if it's a batch of 5,000 figures or 20,000 or whatever, they would make that batch and then they would move on. They would move on to the next product. And that's what hot toy collectors in the 1/6 scale community, that's what we sought. That's what we loved. Because if you miss that boat, that boat has
Ship
left the
sailed.
dock. It's done. It's all done. So things changed. Like I said, and I don't know if you're aware of that, but the first reissue with Hot Toys was the Chewbacca and Han Solo 2-pack. I don't know if you're aware of that or not. And it changed everything. Like, what's going on here? What's going on here? So it spooked the collectors. It didn't scare most of us off because we thought there'd be no value in the Hot Toys, but that's not necessarily the case because
Right.
I don't know if you've mentioned this in your charts. I think you have, where the reissue of the Death Trooper, right, with different packaging, it's a reissue. It still fetches a decent profit. It still has value even on the secondary market. So reissues necessarily.
Well, no, all those other
Yeah.
you're talking about the Death Trooper that just came out for the Mandalorian, which is pretty
Yes.
much a reissue.
Yes.
It's
It
a
is a reissue,
different
yeah.
variation, but it's the same figure.
It's the exact same figure, but it's still
The Specialist Deluxe from
yeah.
Rogue One is very close to entering. I think it actually did. I have to actually go to my website, but I think it happened after the show. Entered the $600 tier range. While that figure's out, the Death Troopers from Rogue One are rising up. You're seeing they straight reissued, right? Like let's talk about the Han and Chewie, the Attack of the Clones Yoda. That figure is really skyrocketing right now as well.
Yeah.
So you're seeing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that being said, that's one of the things that I had talked about last night was that we all think that we're being flooded with reissues, and in reality, I only came up with about 15 reissues.
I agree.
Going to the 600, because we just had our MMS 600, which is the Iron Man Mark V with the suit up and the new head sculpt and so forth. So when you take that number and then you divide it, you come up with it, depending on if you count the Christopher Nolan, because the Christopher Nolan one, I haven't decided yet if it's a reissue because it is a different head sculpt. It's less than 3%, so it's not a lot. It's less than 3%.
But like if you're going to collect like using a painter like Thomas Kincaid, I brought up Pablo Picasso, but before, and I know this is a way far stretch, but for lack of a better example, If each one is very unique, I think that there is some value in hot toys that maybe we're forgetting. I think it's the reason why we collect hot toys, to circle all the way back to where we started.
Yeah.
Is the reason where the value of hot toys really is.
Yeah.
And I think for people that are coming in, it's possible. I'm not saying, that's I'm possible that this could be a slight factor in projecting value later on, years to come, with some of these, especially with some legacy characters, and the fact of how unique it is. Oh, this is a hot toy.
Yeah.
Not one is the same.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's food for thought. I mean, tossing
It
it
is.
around.
I've always seen it. I've never there are a few character one-offs that years 10 years later are still below retail, but it's still a small percentage. It's still a small percentage. I mean, the one that always pops into my head is the Mandarin from Iron Man 3. You can still get him in the bargain bin. Hot Toys Mandarin, Electro from Amazing Spider-Man. There's a few others, but it's maybe a handful of characters that
Mhm.
are still being sold below retail. I think the Shatari soldiers are still trending underneath. I mean, the Shatari soldiers were released almost 10 years ago, and they've just never been able to climb above their retail price. So there are a few, but again, I want to say, oh, somebody in YouTube did maybe it was King Zachary, where he did a breakdown on the numbers. He did some number breakdowns, and it's like, look, it's still like a very fraction small percentage of characters, but for the most part, depending if it's a month you hold on to the figure or 2 years, majority of the hot toys are either A, going to sell for the retail price, or B, you're going to make a tidy summons. So it's you just have to be careful if you're a new collector, because
Mhm.
I'm aware that there are new collectors out there that are sandbagging purchases, hoping to make a quick flip. And I know a lot of people got burnt with the Mark L50, and there's a few other figures that they bought hoping to flip and just became stagnant. So, and I want to say there's a few Star Wars Hot Toys collectors that thought that the Beskar Mandalorian was going to be on that same path, and then are now stuck with brand new Beskar armor deluxes that they can't unload, because even if you sell it at retail on eBay, you're still taking a loss on it.
Well, to be quite honest, and I've had, subscribers and people that follow me have reached out saying, "Hey, I'm gonna, get this to flip," or I've heard it in other channels and people
Yeah,
buying things to flip. And I'll be honest with you, I run the market value chart, and I don't flip any, and I see the numbers right there. I
yeah,
just don't. I just think it's a bad idea. I mean, sure, if you see something out there, it's like, you go into a comic shop and you see two Darkseid Anakins for $235. Sure, well, maybe pick a second one up. I probably would, and put that up. But I'm not picking up two IG-11s or two Rays, or
yeah,
two Kylos, or two heavy infantry Mandalorians. I just, and at the end of the day, too, even if you can make an extra couple of $100, like, wow, I paid, you know, 305 for this with shipping or taxes. And by the time you go ahead and sell it for 425, what are you really making for all that time and effort?
yeah,
Eh,
yeah. It's really, I mean, unless you have a high-end Grail, but I mean, a perfect example is K2SO.
mm,
He's trending on your chart, yeah. Where a lot of people unloaded him thinking that he was going to get, because I do remember seeing that on social media where a lot of people sold their K2SO, thinking that he was going to show up on the new show or something, the new row, and then it turned out that the actor went on social media. It's like, yeah, I'm not in the first season of a of a,
and that could be misdirection as well. He could
and
show up.
it could, but it would suck that if the first season doesn't do well, that's it. We
Yeah.
may never ever see K2SO again, and it, I guess people can wish that, oh, it'll just get reissued. I'm like, it doesn't work like that with Hot Toys. Yeah, they've reissued certain characters that are trending very well in the secondary market, but if you dig deep, there's a little bit of logic to that, because somebody in the offices of Hot Toys is going through an Iron Man 2 kick. I mean, they're reissuing Whiplash, the first version. They're reissuing War Machine. They're reissuing the Mark V, the diecast. They're reissuing a new version. I mean, somebody at that office is clearly in love with Iron Man 2. We still don't know, because a lot of people felt that the Mark, I don't know if you keep up with the Mark 47. Are you familiar with this suit? The Mark 47.
I'm familiar with following all the Marvel, but not exactly with that suit. So you have to explain it to me.
So the Mark 47 got reissued, and it's trending. I mean, it was one that before it got reissued, my God, this thing was like $1,500 brand new. It was insane. Oof. It was the Spider-Man, the first version of Homecoming. It was a Spider-Man Homecoming Tony Stark suit, the Mark 47 with the and it just blew up. Nobody pre-ordered him. It was a small batch and blew up. Then it got reissued, and a lot of people feel that it was, it's Hot Toys looking at the secondary market. And I'm still on the fence about the whole. I know a lot of people in the community feel that Hot Toys is looking at the secondary market, but I can list you quite a few of Hot Toy Grail pieces right now that are worth a fortune that they have not reissued yet.
Right, exactly.
I always point to the DeLorean. The DeLorean Hot Toys is a mint pre-owned on the secondary market, and they need cash. Well, they have the molds for the DeLorean, Doc Brown, Marty, all of that stuff that's going for buku dollars on that. I mean, they have and I know they still have the Back to the Future license, because they're releasing those little vinyl pops that the Asian market likes, those little vinyl little figures. So they're making they're making that. So to quote you have to wonder if they have strategic ways of reissuing things. So going back to the Mark 47, where I was leading with the Mark 47, why it was reissued. It was reissued before Black Widow was going to hit theaters, and then the whole pandemic hit. The big rumor was, and we can't confirm this because no one's seen the film, was that the Mark 47 was going to be featured in that film because it's a prequel film to right after Civil War. I'm like, that would make sense, because that was the suit that Tony was wearing. We don't know that. We don't know if that Mark 40. So if you dig a little bit deep into some of these reissues, they usually tend to tent pole. I don't know if you're familiar with the industry tent pole.
No, explain that to me. I've heard it, but
the industry term tent pole, like a circus tent pole, is to take it. So a tent, when you're pitching a tent, is to take advantage of the very tip, right, of that tent, of the pole. And for Snyder Cut Justice League, there was a lot of big hype, a lot of big hoopla right at the tip of that tent. So it would make sense that one of their biggest sellers, the Nightmare Batman, that they would take advantage of that, because the hype and the excitement was there. And people love Superman. Superman Hot Toys is always sold. And so you understand the logic behind that. Yeah, that was a safe bet. They're probably getting swamped, so there was a safe bet on that reissue. So when you dig a little bit deeper into some of these reissues, it tends to make a little bit more sense. So
and they packaged that in a 2-pack, which was very interesting.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. They did it. They tent-poled that Boba Fett 2-pack when Boba Fett debuted on the show. So it's a good strategic way of running a business. It really is. You put out your heavy hitters and your best hits when the excitement is there. So
and people ask me all the time about Darkseid Anakin, and to your point, I think you said that was sitting. They couldn't get rid of those for the longest time, but now it's going so high. I actually don't see them reissuing that figure by itself. I can see them maybe saying, you know what? They're spending $800-900 for this figure. Let's repack it like the Nightmare Batman with another figure for $500.
Yeah.
Or $495. And if people
Yeah.
are spending $800, spend
Yep.
$500. I could see that.
Yep. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's how you would do it. That's exactly how. You're not going to re-release that Anakin. And then and here's the thing too. What made that Anakin, that Darkseid Anakin, extra unique was the stand. He came with a lava droid. So
Yes.
yeah, a very nice, attractive, illuminated droid, which is, you know, I love the Star Wars droid, so I always collect the
I
droid.
have that too with that.
So even if you were to, and I can see Hot Toys doing this out of spite, if it would make sense that they would release the Darkseid Anakin in a 2-pack, just to hedge their bets, just to cover their bets. But if you did get that Darkseid Anakin, same reissue, would you get that base? Because that base was a Toy Fair. That figure was a Toy Fair exclusive. That was.
I don't think they give you the base.
I don't think they would either.
No,
I don't think they would either. I don't think you would get that base. And again, that was a Toy Fair because just months prior they had released the regular Anakin, and one of the reasons why the Darkseid didn't sell so well because everybody felt Hot Toys was they were scamming them. They were like, oh, I just bought the regular Anakin 3 months prior, and they do this Toy Fair exclusive. Well, you won't get me, Hot Toys. You're not going to screw me like that. I remember that. You know, I was on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I remember the complaints and all the griping about that. And I'm like, you know, so.
But, you know, technically that's Darth Vader. You know, I mean, it really, really is. If you're, you know, when you watch the Revenge of the Sith, it is such a different character at that point, even because, you know, I think a lot of us forget. We think Darth Vader. We think Darth Vader when he says, you know, where's Padme? And he's on the, you know, the med bay table, whatever, there at the end. But really, the Emperor called him Darth Vader, you know, after he killed Mace, or we think he did.
Yeah. Yeah, he didn't survive that fall, did he? Or did he use a force push to get not?
He used a force push and then somersaulted into somewhere else, and we'll be back on Disney Plus, baby.
I don't know. I mean, I mean, we got that's right, the Jango Fett. That's right. We are getting the Attack of the Clones Jango Fett with the helmet detaches, or I mean, I'm assuming that'll be an option. That'll be a Jango Fett with a head rolls off into the desert Geonosian arena there. That's Mace
I
Windu.
can't wait to get that figure. That I mean, yeah, that's a great figure. I'm looking forward to a lot of the legacy ones they have up, like the Lando and the Snowspeeder pilot Luke, and you just mentioned the Django. It's kind of interesting with everything going on with Hot Toys right now. It's almost like I keep forgetting Django's up on pre-order. It's kind of funny.
No, there's quite a bit. There's actually quite a bit, and I made that video, and it's probably a little bit. Let me see if I still have it here. It's a little bit outdated, but you can kind of scroll because some of these have already arrived in the US. But I'll put the video up, and I'll see if I can keep the audio so we can talk over it. Let me see here. All right. Well, it won't let me unmute you, Open, but you can kind of see. There you go. Captain Rex. Yeah. If you hit your unmute button, Aries, you can speak on your icon. I don't know if you can do that or not. You can, if it'll let you.
There I am. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I can hear you now. So this is, like I said, some of these have been shipped, but when you see this, when you visually see how many, and I haven't updated this video, a little montage, but when you see how many are in the horizon, and half of this is supposed to drop by the end of this year.
Yeah,
it opened. It's a lot. The Death Watch Mandalorian, the Jango Fett, the quarter scale, which I still don't understand why they did that. a separate quarter scale of the child, which I think will probably do better than the regular quarter scale. The Tusken Raiders.
I think you're right on that. Yeah, there's yeah. I mean, it's quite a lot, and I think there's going to be a whole lot more. I remember. I think you did a video with this, right, where you were talking through it. Yeah, it's very telling, isn't it?
It's. I mean, short trooper, regular trooper, dark.
They're
trooper.
Not moving the short troopers. It's real interesting to know. They're very low right now. Right now, anyway. Yeah.
Assault tank commander.
Really
there's
low,
so many of them. Unfortunately, I can't pause the video, but IG-11. I mean, technically,
still waiting for that.
I'm still waiting for him. Ahsoka Tano. Regular. This is the single version of Boba Fett.
Well, and you're going to get that clean version. For sure. And I think before the book of Boba Fett.
Oh yeah, the blurred stormtrooper.
Wow.
Commander. Yeah,
that's a lot.
Yeah, I'll have to do. I'll see if I can do a updated version of this little montage here, because I can subtract 2 or 3, but then I could also add 4 more that have been announced. So yeah, it's a little when you see it visually like that, you're like, oh, there's quite a lot.
Well, and if they wind up adding, like we're thinking, it can get up to 55 or whatever it is, even 45. That really gets very extensive when you put it in that perspective. Yeah,
you're right. I mean, that's why I'm very, I'll keep saying it. I love Star Wars, but I don't trust it, because this is 30 plus pre-orders. And again, to the audience, well, some of these have been shipped. Well, I can subtract a few, but hell, I can add a few more that have already been announced, like the Quill Blurg on there. So it's still a lot. It's still trending about 34, 35, right?
Yeah.
When these things start to drop, and if the Star Wars community is not there to step up to the plate and bat, it could kill it. I mean, it can crash. That's what a market crash is, right? If I understand my layman's term, a market crash is that when all these pre-orders come in and they ship and everybody starts canceling. Because are you aware of that too, by the way, Aries? Did you know that Sideshow has a policy that if something keeps getting delayed, right, you can cancel your pre-order and you can get your non-refundable deposit back?
I am aware.
Okay.
And here's the thing with this, and I think for a lot of these that are coming out, you're looking at a lot of the Clone Wars releases towards the end of this year. Mm-hmm. You're going to have the Book of Boba Fett hype that is really going to start that train, especially after the Bad Batch here. Right? They're going to start that whole campaign, and it's going to bring a lot, I think, of collectors in. Then, right, they're going to, because of all the success they had with the end of the Mandalorian season 2, with the ending credits like they do with Marvel, they're going to have more with the Book of Boba Fett. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, going into next year, in the middle of next year is what I heard with the Obi-Wan series and then some other series. I think that's when you start getting, now after the Book of Boba Fett, we're supposed to get that Lando, right? We're supposed to get the Snowspeeder pilot Luke in June. Yeah. We're supposed to get the Tusken Raider, even though they're calling that a Mandalorian. I'm just calling that a Tusken, a Sand People 12-back. I think that we'll be in good shape from as far as Star Wars interest, as far as a lot going on the channel. And I actually think maybe as far as interest goes from the world in Star Wars at that point, they'll probably be showing a lot more upcoming content for next year with the Book of Boba Fett. And as we get close, then even they gave us a bunch of teases, but they're going to have a whole lot pumping out over there. I think, that's going to generate some interest. And you have to wonder how many new fans are going to come in. Will that support Hot Toys? Will that? So I almost see the bubble bursting, like you're saying, but I also see that they're maybe banking on, and who knows, as COVID lifts, what's going to happen? Could there?
What in years? And I'll run a holodeck simulation for you. All right, hear me out on this holodeck. I'm going to program the holodeck here for you. All right, so the Book of Boba Fett drops in Christmas, right? We now have a phenomenal tentpole success, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they announce Boba Fett with, hell, let's add Bib Fortuna, right? Fat version of Bib Fortuna. Or the his female sidekick. I can't think of her name. The sharpshooter that Boba
Fennec.
Fett. Krennic. Is it Krennic? I'm sorry.
No, Fennec Shand.
Fennec. Yeah, Fennec Shannon. Right. So the premiere is a big success, and Hot Toys decides to ride that tentpole and create a 2-pack collector set, and everybody's super duper excited. And at that point in time, assuming we don't have delays, but in my holodeck simulation, we're going to have some delays, right? So a lot of the Star Wars pre-orders have been delayed. So, and now let's people jump out of some of those pre-orders, because you can do that with Sideshow, right? Oh, the Empire Strikes Back Luke has been delayed, or Lando, or some of the ones that are supposed to drop. You know what? I'll grab $50 out of that, and I'm going to now swing it on over to this 2-pack over here, right? Because this 2-pack is what's hot. This is what everybody's. This is the whole cat's meow. So that's one possible simulation that I 100% fear, and I can foresee happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
People are borrowing from Paul to pay Peter type deal.
If they're delayed, if they're delayed,
exactly, because they're super excited. They're jumping for joy. They're doing somersaults because the premiere was a huge success. But dude, you just jumped ship out of 2 existing pre-orders, maybe 3. I don't know. In my simulation, I'm gonna use 2, and that purchase order has already been sent to Hot Toys, and they are going to fill that allotment to Sideshow. They're going to send that ship. So now they have a dead stock, and if that happens enough, that's where the strain and the stress, and that's why I've been on this road tour about, like, be careful with these day one pre-orders, because you might end up with a better deal, if you just wait. And we saw a recent example of that with the Blurg, where a lot of people pre-ordered the Mandalorian, the Blurg set, and realizing that the better deal was probably the Quill and the Blurg, and unless you wanted the original Mandalorian, or you wanted an extra or whatnot, if you just would have waited, the Quill and the Blurg would have been the better value in curating your collection, because that's what we're doing. We are curating our collection to a point where we don't have to suffer the tap out, because nobody wants to tap out. That sucks. So yeah, that's my holodeck. And in my holodeck simulation, the safeties are off, Aries. I know you know Star Trek. So I've removed the safeties out of the simulation. So that's my fear.
So and I totally agree with that. And let me throw in some differences. And I can absolutely see that happening and that being an issue. Yeah. You have to wonder if Hot Toys, and I someone sent me a quote from Howard Chan actually this week, where he was speaking about how the sequel figure sales for Hot Toys were a disaster, for him. And I don't remember the exact quote exactly, but it really, showed some interesting things to me in perspective. You have to, I know, like with these Beskar Mandalorians, they made a lot. You have to think that, are they going to limit production in some way? And almost, are they going to toe a fine line in projecting when they're working with a distributor such as Sideshow? Like, okay, you sent us this purchase order. You're already figuring out that a certain amount of people are going to drop out of these. You're going to have this dead stock, as you're talking about. Plus, they were maybe thinking about having extra stock, right? Well, give me, just throw out a number, 500 more of these. Are they being very careful, especially in the COVID environment and these new times economically and whatnot, where they may err on the side of being conservative so they don't get in that situation? And is it also possible where, Hot Toys is realizing that, okay, we need a vast array, we need volume because we're not going to sell. There's not a whole lot of there's not
Yeah.
going to be as many numbers for one item. So
Yeah.
now I need 5 items to
It
make
could
up
be.
for the
It could be. That's actually a really good simulation, because if you go on the website, in the years that I've trolled the Sideshow website, I have never seen this amount of dead stock. Majority of it from Marvel, right? But regardless, it is still Hot Toys, peg warmers, dead stock, whatever you want to call it. I can only imagine what that warehouse looks like. Just merchandise piled on top of each other. It would would just be a disaster. But I mean, this is what this is why I love listening, watching and listening to you, and this is why I enjoy trying to coordinate and navigate my way through discussion, because like I said, and I really do love Star Wars. I really do. I just don't trust it. I just don't, because I can see all of this just going pop and just going away.
Absolutely.
Going away, because it's happened multiple times in the years that I've been. I can see it, but I do enjoy it because they're committed to characters that I feel we need. Yes, a Tusken Raider, a character that can work with in any iteration of Star Wars. It can work with the prequels. It can work with the classic trilogy. It can work with, we're getting the Luke in the speeder outfit. I mean, wow, great classic trilogy characters that I'm just like, please give us more,
Yes.
And, let's build that trust up. And I just hope that, because I really don't want to, I told you so. I'm like, no, I told you so. No, I don't, because I would love to have multiple versions of C-3PO. I really would. I'd love to have the Attack of the Clones C-3PO. I would love to have a Phantom Menace C-3PO.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah, I would love to have these droid. I would love to have 99, the droid for Jabba, that made R2. I mean, I would love to have more droids. I would love to even have the alien, the creatures, I want them, but we have to, I guess the company has to feel confident that we aren't going to pull the rug underneath them. Like, you know what? These collectors, we went all out and they did us over. We should have learned our lesson from the prequel sequels. Shit, what's the, shame on them, shame on us type deal. And we're going back to making $400 Falcon Captain, winged just out of spite. Another neon tech. And we don't care what the what the US collector thinks, because as much as we gripe about a neon tech suit, they still sell. They still love them out there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got that market to consider as well. No, I think that you're right. We have been burned before, and it has been shaky, unstable ground, to say the least, and certainly a lot of turbulence and things that we've learned through the years. And I think we have to walk very carefully as we're doing these. But it's going to be very interesting to see how much they come up with. But yeah, I do think it is possible, like I said, that they could be focusing on, more with less volume. But we'll have to see.
We'll have to see. You're absolutely right. And it's just a service that I think a lot of us are really doing for the community. So yeah, it's a big thanks to you. I think you're really dishing out those real numbers and statistics, and just everybody out there, anybody that it isn't so much have a vested interest in, just really going above and beyond, because this community really is growing. I mean, it's wow, it's blowing up. So, but I'm going to end it. I'm gonna end it. Otherwise, we'll keep because I mean I will keep picking your brain, and I'm gonna cut it here. Aries, phenomenal. My God, I can debate with you philosophically with Star Wars and every version of intellectual property that exists, and I get a kick out of it. I really do. So I want to say thank you so much for coming on to my channel, and I definitely gotta jump. Am I jumping into one of your did I committed to something to you, right? I'll pass the torch
Yes.
on to you. I did, right?
Yes, you did.
Yes.
You are committed to come on our July 2nd show on Friday,
I will be
9
there.
p.m. Eastern.
I will be there. I'll be there, and I'll be there swinging my finger, right? And I'm like, I'll be doing the or is it the Han Solo? You're here.
Well, no, I mean, it was a real honor to be on here. I can't thank you enough, Denobi, for having me on, and the feeling is mutual. I love the banter back and forth with you, and the real, just intelligent and real conversation. I feel like we're both shooting from the hip and sharing our experiences and perspectives, and this was a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun. I think that both of us, I think I can that we do love Star Wars, but the big difference is I don't trust it, but you have more faith in the Force with it.
There's a little faith, yeah.
You have more faith, so I respect you for that. I'm more wary. I think there's a cloud. There's a dark cloud that's clouding everybody's judgment. So there's definitely a Phantom Menace around.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that.
But folks, thank you for joining us on this awesome live stream. Link in the description. Go follow Aries on 6 Scale Cantina. He does a phenomenal job talking about everything, all goodness, Hot Toy Star Wars, and he brings up some really good insights and covers the secondary market. So it's very useful, very helpful. And I'll be hanging out on his channel at July 2nd. I forget, but you're going to remind me anyway.
July 2nd, Friday, July 2nd, 9 p.m. Eastern.
9 p.m. Eastern. So goodbye, folks. This was fun.